Hi, and welcome to today's episode, which is all about people pleasing at work and how it's probably holding you back and a few ways to implement some changes. So, first, let's get clear on what we mean by people pleasing in a professional setting, because it's not about being helpful, kind, or cooperative, positive team player. Those are great traits, but people pleasing is all about when you prioritize other people's needs and wants over your own to the point that it starts negatively impacting you. And it often comes from deep rooted beliefs about your worth being tied to what you do for others. Maybe growing up, you learned that being helpful, agreeable, or putting others first earned you approval and it felt good, or it earned you safety. And those learned survival strategies probably helped at the time that they developed. However, they can become habits that carry over unhelpfully to adulthood and show up at work in ways that leave you feeling exhausted, undervalued, or even burnt out. Now, some of these signs might be obvious, like constantly saying yes to tasks outside your job role or staying late to fix other people's mistakes. But there are also less obvious ways it creeps in. And let's talk about those ways you might not expect and what you can start doing about it as well. So, for example, do you ever find yourself resenting your colleagues or manager? Maybe you feel irritated or even snappy when they ask for help, but then you do it anyway. And this often happens when you've been people pleasing for so long that your boundaries are constantly being crossed. People might start to associate you with always going the extra mile, so they always ask you, but you're not expressing how you really feel. So it keeps happening and keeps continuing, and that frustration just builds up inside you, simmering under the surface. And sometimes this resentment can seep out in your tone of voice, or it might leave you fantasizing about quitting altogether, just getting up and, storming out, and that being the end of it. It can just feel like it's getting too much. Another sign is downplaying your successes or avoiding self promotion because you don't want to make others feel bad, or you don't want to come across like you're bragging or boasting or a big headed. And you're worried about people judging you in a negative way. And that can hold you back from opportunities like promotions or from being recognised for your hard work. You might not even put yourself forward for something in case you get it because you don't want to feel bad for the people that don't get it. Another way it can show up is avoiding difficult conversations. So you might find it hard to give constructive feedback to colleagues or team members, even when it's part of your role. Or perhaps someone makes inappropriate comments in the office. And instead of addressing it, even though it doesn't sit right with you, you stay quiet because you don't want to cause a scene or be the odd one out. You might even find yourself laughing along or nodding along with something that just doesn't fit with your values, just because you want to feel like you fit in and be accepted. And these behaviours often stem from a fear of rejection or being seen as difficult, but they can leave you feeling disconnected from your true self and feeling all conflicted. Another way it can show up is taking on too much responsibility. So this might be one that's more obvious than the others. If you're in a management role, you might struggle to delegate because you're worried about putting on others. So instead, you shoulder more responsibility than the actual job requires, which can lead to burnout and impairing your productivity because you're just so exhausted with it all and you feel frazzled. You might avoid seeking support as well because you're afraid of being judged as not being good enough at the job. So you just push through alone, even when it's overwhelming. People pleasing can also show up in small, everyday ways too. Things like being the one that always offers to make the brews for everyone, or you're chipping into a collection for someone you don't even know, or for a colleague even when you can't afford it, or you feel obliged somehow to be the organiser, the one that sorts out the social events or celebrations for people's birthdays, even when no one has explicitly asked you to. Another way it shows up is avoiding necessary conversations. So perhaps you know that you deserve a pay rise, which you probably do if you've been doing extra work, or you know you've earned time off, but you're avoiding the conversation with your manager because it feels confrontational to you, like you feel sick with anxiety at the thought of it. That can leave you feeling undervalued by your manager, even if they have no idea to the extent of the extra work you've been doing because maybe you've not shown them. You might hesitate to ask for things like annual leave or overtime payments because you feel bad, or you're worried it will inconvenience other people or make you seem demanding, even though you know rationally you deserve that. And over time, it just contributes to that feeling of resentment and exhaustion. In a similar vein, struggling to speak up's a big one for people as well. So maybe you're sat in meetings, you've got an idea or a concern you want to share, but you hold back because you're afraid of how it'll be received. You might even feel that sense of adrenaline building up as you're psyching yourself up to speak. But then ultimately you end up staying quiet and then you're beating yourself up afterwards. And that can lead to other people's ideas being heard and being taken on board. And maybe they even voice your idea, which is just so frustrating for you. And then you're not contributing fully and you're not being recognised for the ideas that you have. One way it can show up is during your discomfort for other people's comfort. And that might be being sat next to a really chatty, talkative colleague who's constantly interrupting your focus. And though you feel your stomach sink with frustration and you dread sitting next to them, you can't ask them to stop. Maybe because you don't want to hurt their feelings or be seen as rude, but it's just so annoying for you and really intrusive and interrupting your flow. Or perhaps those small moments don't seem like much, but over time they all add up and they just leave you feeling drained. And in a vein of feeling drained, one that you might relate to is powering through when you're ill or struggling to ring in sick. You're ill, but are you ill enough to be off? That's the question perhaps going round in your head when you're sick. Maybe you're doubting yourself, unable to determine or trust your judgment of whether you are ill enough, and you're just willing someone to tell you that it's okay to take the day off. I've been there. I was always getting ill because I would constantly try and power through because it felt easier to do that than to deal with the awful discomfort and anxiety of having to ring in sick. If I did ring in sick, I'd worry that they thought I was making it up, like I wouldn't be believed. And then I wouldn't be able to relax because I'd be overthinking it. And I'd feel guilty too, like I was letting people down and worried that people were thinking bad of me. And it was more exhausting than being ill sometimes. And one close to that is not taking annual leave when you're entitled to. And it's a big one that came up in my Instagram stories recently. So feeling like there's absolutely no way of not going in. Like there's too many important things going on, maybe projects that need to be finished. You feel like you're essential or you're needed, and you think of how your absence will impact other people, so you just don't take the annual leave. And if you generally struggle with boundary setting at work, you might find that a factor is feeling like it's harder work by the time you get back in because of the stuff that you know will inevitably be piling up because perhaps you've not set any limits on how much people contact you and stuff like that. If any of this resonates, please know you're not alone. These are all not uncommon when you're dealing with people pleasing. But recognizing these patterns is the first step to changing them. And these behaviors often stem from fear of rejection, of being thought badly of, being seen as difficult, or a fear of missing out or losing opportunities as well. You always want to be involved in case you miss out on something. But the truth is, these habits are actually holding you back from thriving in your career. And an uncomfortable truth about people pleasing at work is that despite your best intentions to be seen as the helpful one, the agreeable one, it can sometimes lead to a lack of respect from others. When you're always saying yes, never setting boundaries, or avoiding standing up for yourself and voicing your ideas, colleagues and managers might start to assume that you'll always be okay with doing more than you're required and more that you're paid to do. Or they will continue to put their needs ahead of your own, intentionally or not. It's not that they're bad people, perhaps, it's human nature to take someone's constant availability for granted and to get used to how people are and the dynamic of a relationship. And over time, this can leave you feeling undervalued, underappreciated, or even invisible. You might end up being overlooked for promotions or pay rises, especially if you downplay or minimize how much you do. But the good news is, respect is something you can build up by managing people's expectations of you, advocating for yourself, setting clear boundaries, setting limits, and showing others that you value your time and contributions. And when you respect yourself, others are far more likely to follow suit. You are helping people realize how you want to be treated and showing them what you will and won't accept. If you're constantly overextending yourself, it can inevitably lead to burnout because there's only so much energy you can give before you crash. You're only human. Plus, it can create that frustration in relationships when you're always the one picking up the slack. It feels one sided and resentment can build up. And over time, that can damage your relationship with colleagues or managers, especially if that frustration leads to you being perceived in the way that you're not wanting to in the first place. It can become self perpetuating if you start being perhaps passive aggressive or snappy, because that frustration's just got too much and it's causing you to behave in a way that you don't want to. Now, let's talk about what you can do to break free from these habits and start advocating for yourself at work. And the first step is always awareness. Start noticing the moments when you say yes when you really want to say no, or when you suppress the urge to speak up. Pay attention to when you find yourself saying sorry unnecessarily. The more aware you are of the what, where, when, and who with in which these habits show up, the better place you are to do something about it. And then, once you're aware, think about small changes you can make, what's manageable for you. These don't even have to be visible to others at first. You could set a quiet boundary for yourself by blocking out even 15 minutes of time to step away from work and let your body and mind settle. Even a short break like that can help you recharge, and in the long run, it will help you be more productive and increase your output. I know it's easier said than done, especially when you're in the middle of something and you're in full flow. You don't want to step away from your desk or whatever. You feel tempted to just keep going and keep going. But that pause can be so powerful because it just helps your nervous system settle a bit when you're always go, go, go. Another small change might be implementing a cut-off time for work, like finishing on time for once, or making a pact with yourself not to check emails after 6 p.m, for example. And when it comes to more explicit boundaries, start by practicing saying no to smaller requests. For example, if a colleague asks you to help with something outside your responsibilities, try responding with, I'm afraid that's not something I deal with, or I'm afraid I'm at full capacity right now. And if your manager comes to you again with extra work, maybe you could say to them, what would you like me to delegate so I can take this work for you? Instead of you just automatically taking the extra, no questions asked. And try and reframe your mindset. Remind yourself that saying no doesn't make you selfish, it doesn't make you lazy. It makes you clear about your priorities and helps manage other people's expectations of you. It's far better to say no up front than to take on too much and struggle to follow through with that and then worry about letting people down. Setting boundaries is not just healthy for you, it also sets an example for others, and it helps colleagues respect you and learn how you want to be treated. And remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. Taking care of your needs allows you to show up better at work and do your job more effectively. Make sure you're tracking your achievements as well. Keep a record of any success, anything you do that's extra, even if it feels small. Track the times you went the extra mile, supported colleagues, or helped someone out with something, as well as noting down stuff that you're really proud of. And then when it's time for a one-to-one or a promotion discussion, you've got a note and a record that will help you advocate for yourself with concrete examples. And if the self-doubt creeps in, which often it will, that list can remind you of what you're capable of. And it's not about you boasting, being big-headed if you're telling yourself that. It's simply you are listing and stating the facts of your achievements. That's all it is. And another change you could make, especially if you're in a management role, is around delegating. Remember that delegating is not about burdening others. It's about trusting your team and actually helping them and giving them opportunities to grow and to learn. Be mindful of how you phrase delegating when you do delegate. Avoid saying sorry for it, because delegation, if you're a manager, is likely to be part of your role, and there's no need to say sorry for that. It can send mixed signals to them and to yourself as well, because every time you say sorry, it's like sending a signal to your brain that you do have something to be sorry for, even if rationally you know that that's not the case. Delegation is a sign of leadership, not of weakness. Now, people pleasing often keeps your nervous system in a state of hyper arousal, where you're constantly on edge, hyper vigilant, always go, 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 running around for everyone. So it's really important that you start implementing little practices like maybe deeper breathing, relaxing your shoulders when you notice that they're all tense, maybe trying to slow down doing something, even if it's when you're making a brew, not trying to do other things at the same time, like checking your emails on your phone. Just take that moment to focus on making the brew, just noticing how you can slow down just to calm your nervous system a little bit. Maybe doing some mindfulness if you're able to do that, just noticing what's around you while you're waiting for the kettle to boil. That's even just being mindful of that moment. And it just helps you feel a little bit calmer. And the more and more you can implement that, the better placed you will be to be able to regulate your nervous system a bit more. Being able to regulate your nervous system is another reason why it's so important to block out time for you, protect some time. Put it in your calendar, even if it's 15 minutes, just put it in there. Don't wait until it's the day to see if you've got time to fit in 15 minutes for you. Plan it ahead and block it out. Even something as small as stepping away to have a cup of tea in another room can make a difference. Move away from your computer if that's where you tend to be at work. And if these changes feel overwhelming, or you feel anxious, guilty, or there's a fear of being seen in a bad light that's holding you back, it might be a sign that some deeper support would help. Therapy can help you uncover the root of these challenges and learn healthier ways to show up at work. If you'd like a chat about how my approach can help you in your specific situation, feel free to reach out. You can book in for a free chat via my website, charlottebaileytherapist.com, or feel free to DM me on Instagram. Sometimes just having a conversation to gain some clarity and find out what can help can make all the difference. And as I draw this to a close, people pleasing isn't something you can change overnight, and that's okay. The first step is recognizing when it's showing up in your career and just starting to make some small changes. It doesn't have to be a massive, extreme change. And remember, you don't have to sacrifice your well-being to succeed at work. In fact, advocating for yourself and setting boundaries will not only help you thrive, it will also earn you the respect of those around you. If you found this episode helpful and it's resonated, please do like, share, or subscribe. It all helps the podcast gain traction. And if you'd like to hear about a particular topic relating to people pleasing or therapy or therapists, please feel free to DM me on Instagram as well. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you soon.